Welcome back to Horn Takes. It's Thursday. We're going to talk a little bit about college football awards. We're going to talk about the Heisman. Talk a little bit about Texas basketball today. Texas basketball dropped their first game of the season to Illinois. 85-78 on a neutral court. Madison Square Garden. Illinois, I believe, was 17th ranked team in the country at the time. Texas controlled the game for most of the game. They kind of let this one get away from them. They had an 11-point lead late. With about 8 minutes to go, 11-point lead. They just couldn't make any shots down the stretch. Missed the front end of a one-and-one. Tyrese Hunter's, I think he's like a 92% free throw shooter. Misses the front end. Illinois gets the rebound. They take it down and score. Fouled late. Jabari Rice, just making a hustle play, stumbled, fell into one of the Illinois players. Damn near at half court. They were trying to get their offense going, and he just fell in. It was a foul. But that put like their best free throw shooter on the line. And he made some free throws. So they got it into OT, and then Shannon finally came alive. Shannon Jr., a transfer from Texas Tech, scoring a lot of points this year. Scored a lot of points at Texas Tech, but they kept him shut down the majority of the game. But he found a way to start making some shots in OT, and I think that was really the difference. Guard play just wasn't as good this week, or that game. We talked about it a lot. The Texas backcourt is much improved from a long time. They haven't had a backcourt this good in a while. And, they just didn't play that great. They didn't shoot that well. They got into foul trouble. Tyrese Hunter, late in the regulation, had some cramping issues. And I think he had some cramping issues in the game before. Got to get hydrated, young man. You got to stay hydrated. You got to drink water 2 or 3 days before the game, not just at game time. I think I ultimately jinxed them. I've always been skeptical, and then last week I said, man, I'm really starting to think this team could be the team that could make a deep run. And I've said that before, like their makeup looks like they could make a deep run, but I've always kind of been, just cautiously optimistic and sort of talked about the negative things about the team. And last week I finally let my guard down. Bam. They dropped their first game. Not a big deal. It's basketball. Nobody's going to win them all. I think if they would have won that game, it would have been good for them. Good learning experience. And I think because they lost that game, it'll be a good learning experience for them. You got to figure out how to win tough games like that. Obviously, at a neutral site against quality opponents, you got to figure out how to do those things to make a deep run in the playoffs, or the tournament. Let's talk a little bit about college football awards. So, I know a lot of fans put a lot of stock in these awards. It's kind of a bragging right thing. Oklahoma's had a really good run of Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks in the last, 10, 15 years. So it's kind of one of those things where, it's cool as a fan base. You get to brag about it. And I'll caveat everything I'm about to say with if my team was winning a lot of awards, I would think it was cool too. It's good for recruiting, certainly. And then obviously, it's just cool to say, yeah, we had the Heisman Trophy winner. And I remember the 2005 team that had just so many guys. Actually, during Mac Brown's tenure, there were just a ton of guys that won a lot of national awards. And so I get it. But I feel like more and more lately, these awards have turned into, I don't know what they've turned into. The Heisman is an absolute joke anymore. The Heisman is almost completely a quarterback award now. And it's only for those quarterbacks that just happen to be on teams that have really good records. And I think that's bullshit. Like, I think they literally say this is, the Heisman is for the most outstanding player in college football. That doesn't mean you're the quarterback of the best team. Stetson Bennett. So let's talk about these Heisman finalists. We'll kind of run down the finalists, talk about their stats, and we'll talk about some guys that I feel like should be finalists that aren't. If you're truly looking at, if the goal is to truly say these are the most outstanding players, there's a couple of guys that should be in New York City, and there's a couple of these guys that probably shouldn't. We'll talk about these in order I feel like is least likely to win to the most likely to win. So we're going to start off with Stetson Bennett. Him being in New York City is an absolute joke. I mean, this is it's like a slap in the face at a lot of really good players. It's kind of a slap in the face at like college football fans in general. I remember like when I was a kid, like I used to like to watch the Heisman ceremony. Like I thought it was cool. Like these were the best players, right? I don't think 8-year-old little Timmy and little Johnny get to say that anymore. I don't think they get to say these were the best players. Anyway, you got Stetson Bennett, 3,400 yards, which that's pretty good. 20 touchdowns, which is not really good. It's not bad. It's not great though. Quinn Ewers has 18 touchdowns and he missed 4 games and really has played like garbage all year. 7 rushing touchdowns. Stetson Bennett's he's not even Max Duggan. He's certainly not Caleb Williams with the ball in his hand. So this is literally just like a lifetime achievement award or hey, you won the national championship last year and you're a feel-good story because nobody wanted you. And he shouldn't be there. Stetson Bennett should not be in New York City. But there he is. I don't think there's any chance in hell he wins. I don't think there's any chance in hell that he's not fourth in the voting. I feel like the voting's already been done. I think it was done before championship weekend. I think most voters, and I don't know what the window is, but I feel like I heard that the voting window is open, and I think it's open for a pretty long time. So these guys probably were all scrambling just to get their votes in. That's the other thing about these awards. You got these media guys, and there's some ex-Heisman guys that get to vote on this too. But there's no way they can watch all these kids play football. So they're judging all of this based off of headlines and stats and stories like Stetson Bennett. But they got other shit to do. These guys, it's not their job to select the Heisman. And I'm not suggesting we should have like jobs for people and that's what they do. But they got other stuff going on. They really don't care. So they're gonna pick, who they think has the coolest headlines and the best stats and is on the best teams. They don't want to do any research. You're not gonna find any hidden gems in this thing. And they're not gonna go back and look at all these different players on like, let's say 8-4 teams or 7-6 teams that are probably really damn good football players and should definitely at least be considered in the whole thing. And then they're going to vote quick. Once the window opens, they're going to vote because they don't want to mess with it anymore. Max Duggan, I think, will be third in the voting. 3,300 yards, 30 touchdowns passing, and 6 rushing touchdowns. Again, kind of a cool story. I think that's why he's there. His stats are pretty good. Like the touchdown numbers are pretty good comparatively. When you compare him to like say C.J. Stroud or Caleb Williams, they're up there. They're pretty good. And there's no debate that he put his team on his back and did a lot of great things for his team. And the story's cool. Like I said, he wasn't even the starter this year. Comes in and just absolutely, sort of grandfathers his team, leads them to where they're at today. And if they'd have kept the ball in his hands, they'd be 13-0. They wouldn't be 12-1. C.J. Stroud, he's been in the mix all year. I think he was in the mix most of last year. 3,340 yards, 37 touchdowns. The yardage is good, and the passing touchdowns are really good. I think, you talk about disappearing in big games like that. That's C.J. Stroud. I feel like he's disappeared in some of these big games. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how he does in this semifinal. I know he had the Rose Bowl last year. I get it. But yeah, I think CJ I think that guy he'll come in second in the voting. And I think Caleb Williams, to me, out of those 4 finalists, is obviously probably going to get most of the number 1 votes. Over 4,000 yards passing, 37 touchdowns, 10 rushing touchdowns. To me, he's like literally the only reason USC has had any success at all this year. So yeah, I think Caleb. I think most people voted for Caleb Williams even before the Pac-12 championship game. Here's some guys I feel like should have been in, should be finalists. I think Bijan Robinson has to be a guy that you think about as a finalist. He had almost 1,900 total yards, 1,580 yards rushing, 18 rushing touchdowns. He's in the top 5 in almost every rushing category. And then you tack on his ability to catch the ball and get down the field. There was a play earlier this year where he lined up in the slot and just made an incredible catch over the middle. Totally wide receiver-y. I mean, it was amazing. So if you look at the fact that Texas's quarterback play wasn't that good this year, they were still able to win 8 games and they were able to put up a lot of points. And if you look at this guy, the sort of, to me, like the hidden stat for him is like his ability to break tackles. I don't think there's anybody even close to that guy on making the first guy miss and yards after contact. It's kind of a homerish pick, but I think if any fans kind of step back and look at it, I think you're hard pressed to say that A, he's not the best running back in the country, and B, that he doesn't at least deserve to be a finalist for the Heisman Trophy. The other guy I think should be there, and man, he's not in my notes. He was in my notes. I don't know how he got out of my notes. That kid from UNC, the quarterback, freshman, threw for over 4,000 yards this year. I think he threw for 37 touchdowns as well. I mean, he led a really good offense, and their defense is trash. I mean, he had to score a lot of points. That guy had to be good, and he was really good. And so if you're looking at stats, he's definitely a guy that's got to be up there, I feel like. He should be there ahead of Stetson Bennett. Stetson Bennett has this supporting cast on offense and defense that, would make anybody happy. So I don't know. I haven't watched a Heisman ceremony in a long. I think the last one I even paid attention to, and the only reason I did is because my son. I remember this is pretty funny. My son was probably, I don't know, 12, 13, something like that. And we had to actually run out and go to the store for something, go to the convenience store down the street. And he wanted to listen to it. So I don't know how I found it. I found it. It's probably on ESPN, on Sirius or something like that. I found it and we listened to the Heisman Trophy presentation. And it was Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey. It was that one. And I thought Derrick Henry was an amazing football player. Like, don't get me wrong, but I think if you looked at the impact and who's the most outstanding player and obviously carried his team that year, I don't know how Christian McCaffrey didn't win it. So that was the last time I even cared. I could tell you who won it last year, and the only reason I could tell you that is because he played Texas this year, Bryce Young. But I couldn't name you the last 5 Heisman Trophy winners. Just doesn't mean as much to me anymore. We talked a little bit last week about, or the last podcast about just the transfer portal and how it's kind of changed football. Now we've got some stuff. We got some more stuff to talk about from the transfer portal perspective. So the portal opened up on December 5th. That was Monday. Over 1,000 players, Division I football players, entered the transfer portal on Monday. 1,000. There's 130 Division I teams that can carry 85 scholarship players. That's 11,500 scholarships up for grabs any given year across Division I football. And 10% of those guys went into the portal on Monday. So I don't even know what the number is now. 130 teams. Let's say most recruiting classes are around 25. That's 3,250 incoming guys that are taking scholarships. So you gotta knock those scholarships out. They're not available anymore. 8,250 left for players not in their first year. You will have some graduation. You'll have some guys move on to the NFL, or maybe some guys that just decide they're done with football. So it's hard to tell what that final number of scholarships that those 1,000 are actually fighting for, but it's not a lot. And we talked about the last podcast, 43%. Since 2020, 43% of Division I football players that went into the portal didn't find a place to play. So the assumption is they're not in school. I mean, they may have went and found a place to go to school. I don't know. Surely all of them aren't not in school, but it's a huge gamble. Huge gamble these kids are taking. And the crazy thing is, like, to me, there's like timing that goes along with this. I don't think December is the everybody needs to jump in the transfer portal time. Nobody's watching all of these thousands of kids that have jumped into the portal. Nobody even knows who most of them are. December is for Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison, those type of dudes. It's not for incoming freshman guy that didn't get to play at, I don't know, University of Central Florida. It's not for that guy. Yet here are all these guys that are unhappy with their situation. They're unhappy with getting their school paid for. They're unhappy with getting amazing nutrition. They're unhappy with better living conditions. In some cases, they're unhappy with the NIL money that they got at their current school, and they're looking to improve on that. And listen, I'm not being negative about any of those things. I'm not trying to sound like, the 80-year-old guy that's going to tell you they should just shut up and play and be happy they're getting their school paid for. I mean, I think there's some truth to that, but I also get the player side of it. I don't mind the fact that we're finding ways to pay players. I just feel like we need to govern it a little better. We need some better regulation of that. I think one thing nobody's talking about is, does the transfer portal, one of the things we always talk about is, how do we make college football a better product, right? Like how do we make it more enjoyable? We've done playoffs. I think that's made college football more enjoyable. But the other thing it's done is really isolate, this upper tier of teams. It's the same teams just about every single year in the playoff. This year's a little bit different, but typically it's the same teams over and over and over again. And that gives those guys a recruiting advantage. It gives them an advantage in TV money deals. I wonder if the portal is going to continue to make these weaker programs weaker, because think about it. Say you do get like a late blooming type player, like, a guy that was under the radar. Nobody really recruited him. He had a few offers, but they were, small Division I schools. And let's say he plays 3 years at, a place like Miami of Ohio, or, whatever small tier, non-Power 5 team you want to name. And he develops and he becomes like this, really outstanding, solid, NFL type football player. He's probably going to go into the portal and go to a bigger school where he can make more NIL money, where he can get more exposure for the NFL, where he can really promote himself, make himself more NFL ready. He's stepping up the competition. He's going to a place where people are going to watch him all the time. I think you're going to start to see these diamonds in the rough that these smaller schools end up getting are going to end up at bigger schools after a while. And you're going to just continue to make those really weak programs weaker. There's not going to be any really good players, more than likely, that are leaving, Florida State and Tennessee and Arkansas and Louisiana and all these schools going down. One thing I think about is, do these coaches really have time? So 1,000 guys went into the portal. There is thousands more that are high school recruits that these guys have been following and that they will be following. I mean, these coaching staffs, they're looking at guys. They're probably looking at 2026 guys right now, 2027 guys. Not seriously, but they know who some of these guys are. Do they really have time to go through all of that, as well as keep up with all these thousands of players that are going to jump into the portal every year? To me, outside of a few guys, this portal thing is going to be a disaster. I think these guys that are signing with schools and turning around a year later and jumping into the portal, I think most of them are going to end up regretting it, because they're not going to play anymore. We talked about why last podcast. One thing we used to hear about before the portal was even a thing was processing players out. You used to always hear these stories about Nick Saban. Oh yeah, he's processing players out. And what that means is he was sitting down with kids at the end of the season and saying, yeah, man, you're just not what we're looking for at Alabama. I know we recruited you last year, and I know, you were a highly rated recruit and you could have gone to all these different places. But I'm going to have to ask you to leave the program, because you're not giving us what we need here at Alabama. And so there was a lot of talk about Saban doing that every year, because you would see it. You would see guys leave, and then what he was doing. if it's true that that's what he was doing. What he was doing was getting players out so he could get more players in, turning over his roster, right? Well, the portal just sort of exacerbates that. You can go to a guy now and just be, I mean, at least the player now has sort of an out, you know. He can transfer now without that 1 year penalty. You get that one transfer now where you can transfer and you're eligible immediately. But I think these coaches sit down with these guys at the end of the year and they're just like, man, you need to find another place to play because you're not going to play here. I think that's part of the game. I mean, you now have the recourse to go find another school without it penalizing you. And so these coaches are going to take advantage of that fact, and they're going to process players out more than they already have in the past. I'm not a giant fan of that. I wonder what happens for player A if the coach comes to him and says, because I think these scholarships are they're not good for 4 years. I think these scholarships are good for 1 year. And then there's some sort of legal recourse for the university to just not grant that scholarship the next year. I could be wrong, but I think I read that somewhere. Let's assume that's correct. Well, I guess if you assume that's correct, there really is no discussion. But I wonder what happens to a player if he tells the coach, no, I don't want to leave. I want to stay here and be on scholarship to play football. I think in the past you would see coaches honor that, and most coaches would honor that scholarship for 4 years, whether it was 4 year or not. You know, I recruited you. You can be in this program for 4 years, provided you follow all the rules. It doesn't matter to me what you do out on the field. It doesn't matter to me even if you make it onto the field. And some coaches even honored scholarships for guys that couldn't ever play because they got injured. Mac Brown used to do that all the time, and I doubt they came out of that 85. I think they probably had some kind of way to get those guys an academic scholarship. But a lot of coaches probably wouldn't even do that. So I don't like that part of it. It's turning it more into a business for these younger kids. That it's making them have to worry about things that they probably didn't used to have to worry about at most places. I don't know. To me, that's the part I don't like about it. I think there's value in the portal. I think there's value in NIL, but I think it's going to turn it into, I think these guys are going to get a taste of what business is really like, and it's going to start changing a lot of the way college football is. And I've said it before, I'm not an NFL guy. I'm a college football guy, and I like college football for like the tradition and the loyalty to the program and the, you know, all those things we talked about last week. That's what college football is to me. You're a Longhorn, not you're a mercenary that goes to all these different places because you can get a bigger bag or you didn't get to play as much as you wanted to. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how the transfer portal sort of pans out over the next, I don't know, 10, 15 years and see what college football really evolves into. Then you got the Transfer Portal Lifetime Achievement Award. First annual Horn Takes Lifetime Transfer Portal Achievement Award goes to JT Daniels. This guy has 1 year of eligibility left for sure, possibly two, and I don't even know how that's possible. This guy went to USC in 2018. It's 2022. And he's fixing to transfer for his third time. He was at USC 2018, 2019. Got hurt. Decided to transfer because he got hurt and someone became the starter. And I don't know all the back end of that. I mean, they may have told him, dude, we're going to stay with him no matter what. So he transfers to Georgia. He's at Georgia from 2020 to 2021. He gets benched in 2021. in favor of Stetson Bennett. Stetson Bennett obviously leads them to a national championship. So he transfers again. West Virginia has a so-so season at West Virginia, but this freshman kid at West Virginia shows up again when I feel like JT Daniels. I don't know exactly the circumstances. I don't know if he got hurt or just was playing bad, so they put him on the bench. But this freshman kid comes in the last couple games for West Virginia and plays really awesome. And so now he's looking for another team again. I don't know why. Like, what is he thinking? I mean, he was a 5-star guy. He's obviously not a 5-star talent. And I think his opportunity to play at these big schools is gone. I saw an article where sort of the top 3 destinations it looks like for him are Oregon State, Indiana, or Fresno State. Nothing psychs me about that. Like, if I'm JT Daniels, I'm not excited about that. What does he think? He's going to go and I don't know. I wish I knew JT Daniels, and I wish I could get him on the show. I could probably ask him questions for 4 or 5 hours about just his path so far in college football. He might be our winner next year. He can get a red shirt, or he can get a medical red shirt. How crazy would it be if that dude played for 5 different Division I schools? It's possible. We talked a little bit about Coach Prime going to Colorado to be the head coach. We didn't talk a lot about how we thought he would do. I think he'll be able to recruit. He's already getting guys. He was recruiting a lot of D1 talent there at Jackson State. He's going to bring some of those guys with him. There's a lot of buzz about some of the top players in the country wanting to go there. A lot of the top transfers in the country wanting to go there. But how's he really going to do at Colorado? First of all, so I think he'll recruit well, obviously. I think he'll get players there. But what I think he's going to find out is playing Jackson State's schedule is a lot different than playing Colorado's schedule. And I'm not saying he won't make Colorado more competitive. I think he will. But there is no – man, if he went undefeated at Colorado, if he even won the Pac-12 at Colorado, I would be surprised. And I don't think that's anything against him. I just think it's just a different game. I played high school football at the time in Texas at a 4A high school, which would be a 5A high school today. So the second highest classification in Texas. And I played college football at a Division III school, and the difference between play at those 2 levels was astronomical. I mean, you couldn't believe how fast the game was. Just that small jump. And now he's going from, I don't know what the HBCUs are. 1AA, I guess. What we used to call 1AA. He's taking a jump to Division I. It's going to be a completely different game. So I'm not rooting against him at all, and I'm not trying to be negative. I just feel like all these people that are saying he's going to – I mean, I actually saw somebody say he'll win the Pac-12. He's going to have him in the Pac-12 championship next year. No, he's not. No, he's not. It ain't going to happen. One of the problems I think he's going to have is just the way he came in there and talked to his current Colorado team. What incentive do any of those quarterbacks have to stay there at this point? Where's my son? That's your quarterback. Or I'm bringing in, we got some positions already taken care of. So y'all better get ready to get in the transfer portal. Is that really the message you want? I mean, I think I understand, at least I hope the message he was trying to send to his team wasn't as direct as his actual speech. I think what he was trying to tell his team is there's some really good players that are going to come in here. If you guys want to continue to be where you're at and playing, you're going to have to give us something. You're going to have to up your game. I don't think there's anything in the world wrong with that. Competition is great. But when you just flat out come in and say, Shadur, I believe is his son's name. Where's Shadur? That's your quarterback. I don't know how many guys are in that quarterback room right now, but what's the incentive for any of those guys to stay? Without Deion Sanders seeing those guys take a single snap, he told them, this new guy, that's the quarterback. I think that shit's going to backfire on him. I think there's going to be guys leave that program, which is going to make it harder for him to be what he wants to be, which is super successful really fast. That whole press conference, the whole thing about that was crazy. You had the AD telling somebody, and I don't know the exact question that he was asked, but yeah, we don't have the money right now, but we're confident that we're going to get it. I'm not worried about that. Wow. Who says that? What AD says that? I don't know. There's a whole lot of bad press out there about Prime. There's a whole lot of, discussion about how he sold out Jackson State. And I understand where those people are coming from. I don't know. I'm not going to get into that conversation. I don't know if he did or not. I've heard some really compelling arguments for both sides of that discussion. But just talking about football, man, I think the way he approached that team, it wasn't very inspiring. And I think he's going to find out real quick that all those really good players he had at Jackson State that were dominating people, they're not going to go into Colorado in the Pac-12 and dominate people like that. All right, let's talk about the Army-Navy game. Only football game this week. Actually, I think there are some other football games, but I don't care about any of those football games. If I wasn't in the Army a long time ago, I wouldn't have cared about the Army-Navy game probably. So this is a pretty big deal. They've played this is like their 123rd meeting. They've been playing since 1890. Navy has a 11 game edge in the series, 62-53, 7 ties. Navy's favored to win this game by 2.5 points. And I think Navy has been favored to win this game probably more often than not the last 10, 15 years. And I got to be honest, I haven't seen either one of these teams play a single snap this year. But just looking at the stats, man, I think Army's got a chance. They score a lot of points, and they have a lot of offensive yardage per game. Navy doesn't score as many points as you might think. They score less points a game than Army. And I don't know about the competition they've played. But I think Army's offense is going to be too much for Navy. Army's going to win this game 24-23. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be one of those tight games at the end. Some big unexpected play happens. So, yeah, man, I was in the Army. It's going to be Army. Go Army, beat Navy, right? I think this would be a cool game to go to. You got all the cadets on both sides and the midshipmen. It's cold usually. Kind of looks miserable. And then you got all these guys that they're definitely the hardest workers in college athletics, these academy guys. They have almost zero chance of moving on to anything professional sports-wise. They're just out there killing it. And they're running these old school old school offenses, and I don't know. It's just a cool game to watch. I think it would be a cool game to be at. I may try to do that sometime. But yeah, Army's going to get it done. 24-23 over Navy. If you like the podcast, subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends about the podcast. Check out the video on YouTube. Horn Takes Podcast at YouTube. Find me on TikTok. Horn Takes Podcast. Email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com. Give me all your questions, comments, criticisms, concerns. I like them all. Hook 'em.